myself Manish. I'm going to present you this topic now. Okay, the following are the topics covered as part of this presentation today or the webinar today. So, introduction to VLSI, evolution of various transistors which we have been using or which we are going to use in the future. ASIC flow, the basic ASIC flow which we follow, like say starting from specifications till we reach or till we develop one product, which is integrated circuit. We'll be going through all of those steps. Role or importance of a physical design engineer. So at this point of time, I would like to say that I'm a physical design engineer. I'm in the industry with I'm as part of this industry for past 8 to 9 years. So I have good exposure to all the kind of issues or the things which a physical design engineer will face. Latest trends in the lower technology node. So will be the next topic in this. The case studies. I'll be presenting you some of the case studies. And then the job opportunities. So if any person is a VLS engineer, like say in which companies he can approach to, or what kind of offers or roles he has in front of him or her. So I will be discussing in brief. Introduction to VLSI. So first of all, VLSI, it's an acronym for very large scale integration. So then integrator circuit is the one of the end product or the only end product. So which we have after taking our complete process through the design cycle or whatever it is. So our end product is my integrator circuit. So so integrator circuit will be like it is like different components soldered together. I think you might have seen in your digital logic design lab, if any of the audience is from the electronics background, so you'll be aware of this one. So you'll be having the digital logic design lab. You might have developed a clipper or clamper circuit. So where you have put your transistors or resistors on a breadboard, connected them, and then bam. So you're having one circuit, so which is doing one specific functionality. So that we can call it as an integrated circuit. So, but at the same time, you can say like whatever you're using in your mobiles or your laptops. So the processors, also we can call it as an integrated circuits. So we have some difference in between those two things. I will say what it is. So, but before going to that, so I can say integrated circuit will have both active and passive elements. So when I say both active and passive elements, you might be aware that active elements are like bipolar junction transistor, CMOS, or any other transistors which we have. So we can call it as an active element. And also some of the passive elements like diodes, capacitance, and the resistors. So all these together with both active and passive elements will make an integrator. So as I said to you, both of them are processes. Like say the basic circuit which you are designed is an integrator circuit, and also the one which you are using in the mobile CC processor is an integrator circuit. But what is that differentiates both of them? So the complexity decides what type of integrator circuit. For example, SSI, small scale integration. So if at all our circuit is consisting of 10 to hundreds of transistors inside that, we call it as a small scale integration. So next, coming to MSI, so which is medium scale integration. So that means like if at all we're having transistors in between 100 to thousands, so we call it as MS. And then we have LSI. If we have around greater than 10,000 of transistors in your design, we call it as LSI. And then coming to the VLSI, our focus here. So it is like very large scale integration. So if at all we are having around 1 million of transistors in our integrated circuit, we call it as a VLSI, very large scale integration. So we generally use BJT, CMOS in the integrated circuits. So BJT, bipolar junction transistor, is like offers high speed, gain, and low output resistance. So for example, if at all you're looking for high performance in your designs, for example, if you take the case of analog designs, so where you will be dealing with respect to analog signals, which is like continuous signal, sinusoidal, or anything. So then you'll be using this BJT. So that means you need high performance here, and the amount of power consumption doesn't really matter to you over here. So then we'll be going for this kind of BJT here. And on the other hand, CMOS offers high input resistance and better for low power logic gates. So whenever you are having, like say, power is kind of a concern for you, and You can make use of the CMOS, and mostly we'll be using CMOS for our digital logic functionality or digital logic inside your an integrated circuit. So these two together, so will make or will be having as part of my integrated. So we'll use of the various transistors. So let's start with the planar CMOS. So you can see on the screen that we are having I represented one picture over there. So which is a planar CMOS. You can see the source on the one hand and the drain on the other hand. On the top in the green color, you can see which is a drain, which is a gate. So you might be knowing that. So I can say this is the gate. So you might be knowing that BJT is a current control device and CMOS is a voltage control device. So I mean, I'm assuming that like majority of the audience is from the electronics background, and I'm not giving you like in detail or the background of or how the BJT and CMOS is working over here. So, but yeah, I'll assume that you guys are aware of what is CMOS. So I can give you a brief introduction of what CMOS is here. So you can see like we are having the source and here and the drain on the other side. So whenever we are applying some potential on the gate, we'll be having a channel formed in between or underneath this gate. And as the channel is formed, so there will be the transfer of electrons from the source to drain. So then we can say that the device or the CMOS is on and the transfer of electrons is happening over here from the source to drain. So if we, I mean, when the potential applied to the gate is above some VTH, that means we call it as a threshold voltage, only then we can say the channel is formed and the transfer of electrons is happening. So this is how the planar CMOS will be looking like. And we are having the source, drain, the oxide layer over here, the gate. So in the below, we have silicon substrate. You might be well aware of this that we'll be using the silicon for formation of the any kind of transistor. Okay, so I can say the planar CMOS is the horizontal channel. So that means like the source and drain are in the same level, and the gate is just above that one. So that's why we'll call it as a horizontal channel. From source to drain, it's like horizontal, and on top of that, we'll be having the gate in separate layer. So control is from only one dimension. So as I said to you, CMOS is the voltage control device. So we'll be applying some potential on the gate, and the control is only from the one dimension, that is nothing but from the top. So that means like source and drain is in the bottom, and all the other layers in the bottom. On top of that, we're having the gate in the other layer, and then we're providing or we're applying some potential onto the gate. So that means the control is from the top of that, and it's only from one dimension. So earlier ICs are made of the planar CMOS. So back then our technology node is like say it started, I think we have 180 nanometer or 250 nanometer, many things. So before that, earlier we used to have this planar CMOS. So when I say that 180 nanometer or 250 nanometer, whatever it is, that signifies or that represents the channel length. What is the distance between the source to drain? So that will say, so what is the channel length? So that means the channel length decides your technology node. So you can, I mean, you can think of one thing straight away. So if at all the technology node is shrinking, that means if at all the distance from the source to drain is keep on decreasing, so and now we are having we are controlling it only from the top one dimension. So that means what happens? So the controllability of it will decrease if we go further down the line. That means if the technology is shrinking, as we are controlling with the planar CMOS only from one dimension, the controllability will be decreased. We were using the planar CMOS before, but so that was serving our purpose back then. So, but as the technology node is shrinking, so it started losing its credibility, and we are seeing more disadvantages rather than having some of the advantages. So, control, as I said, control will be reduced as the channel length keep on. So, how we are overcome? I mean, how we have overcome this problem, or what we have, what are the various things which we have on the plate. So I will discuss now next. So FDSOI. The next one is the FDSOI. So which is nothing but fully depleted silicon on insulator. So this is still again a horizontal channel. You can see this is the source, drain, and the gate on the top. So this is again a horizontal channel, but you might have noticed that there is significant decrease in the source and drain or the channel height over here. So I said to you that this is fully depleted. So that means the channel is very, very thin compared to my planar CMOS. So it's very thin. We don't even need to add any kind of impurities or dopants in this particular channel. So it's like plain substrate. There is no doping done on this particular one. So that means it's very, very thin. So as it is very thin, so we don't need any kind of extra dopants required over here. So that means it's fully depleted silicon on insulator. So underneath that, you can see ultra thin buried oxide layer. So it is not present in the planar CMOS. So it is present in the FDSOI technology alone, ultra thin buried oxide. So we call it as buried oxide because when we are fabricating this particular CMOS, we will be using, or we'll be fabricating, we'll be adding one layer of ultra thin buried oxide. Above that, we'll be having the source and drain, and above that, we'll be having the gate. So you can see oxide layer on the top and oxide layer on the bottom. So both of them. So we can say like we are having oxide layers on the top and bottom. So in between we are having a thin, very thin channel. So that is how the FDSO technology. So leakage currents over here will be reduced. So when we go for our FDSOI technology, the leakage currents will be reduced. At this point of time, I would like to say what is leakage current. So for example, if the channel is more, okay, so I think you might have all, you should be knowing that ultra thin buried oxide is also an acts as an insulator. So this is the source and this is the drain. And when we speak about the planar CMOS, so we don't have the buried oxide over there, and the channel, the source or drain will be looking like. So the red color lines which I'm drawing will be like similar to my planar CMOS. Assume there is no ultra thin buried oxide in between. So now when the channel is formed, so what happens is, so the electrons, so they will be naughty, right? So they cannot even, they cannot follow one line. So they can go from here to here as well. And some of the electrons might even go to the substrate underneath that. So that means what we call it. So whatever may be, our aim is to have the transfer of electrons from the source to drain, but we are having the other way around. So some of the things, some of the electrons are going somewhere underneath also. That means we call this particular behavior as the leakage. So the leakage is more in the planar CMOS, but we kind of reduce this, or we kind of completely removed this particular thing. So when we have added this ultra thin buried oxide layer underneath that, that means the leakage current, whichever we are having, is kind of reduced buried oxide layer. So I can also say that it's like kind of backgate. So don't you agree? So we are having an oxide layer on the top, and we will be supplying the gate voltage over here, and we are having the ultra thin buried oxide underneath that. And so we will be providing the body bias voltage also. So I think I was not able to represent in this video, in this particular PPT. I can draw you something like this over here. So we'll be having some voltage source over here, and it's like we kind of supply the body bias voltage over here. So we'll be supplying some voltage to the body or the substrate, which is gray in color over here, and also from the top we'll be supplying the voltage to the gate. So the voltage is what the potential difference between two ends. So I can say one end is from the gate and other end is from the substrate. So it's like as we have this kind of thing, okay, we can say that body biasing, okay, we call this as body biasing. As we provide voltage to our body, we call it as body biasing, and the body biasing is kind of efficient when we have this kind of structure FDSOI. So that means I can say a backgate is formed over here. So you can see, I think source and drain you have on the top, we have one gate, and as we have ultra thin buried oxide underneath that, we can say one backgate is formed over here. Okay, I can say you the transistor structure won't change, but the thick layer of insulator will be added below the channel, as I said, and the leakage will be very less compared to the planar CMOS. And next important point here is the better control over body bias and is dynamic. So even with the planar CMOS, we can kind of increase or decrease the body bias, but it's not like accurate, or it's like it won't have the better control as we don't have the ultra thin buried oxide. But with the help of this FDSOI technology, we can say that we have better control over the body bias. We have the better control over the body bias, and I can say it is dynamic too. So when I say dynamic, so once the chip is fabricated, okay, we can even alter this body bias voltage. So what happens when we can alter this body bias voltage? So we are kind of reducing the potential difference between these two plates. So that means we can kind of alter the threshold voltage too. So as we can alter the threshold voltage and it is dynamic too, so that means in the runtime once the chip is fabricated also we can change this threshold voltage whenever we require based upon kind of supply voltage which we give to the FDSOI. So I can say that we can VTH can be altered over here. Okay, so when the VTH is altered, we kind of have two different modes of operations. One is more energy efficient and the other one is more performance. So that means if the VTH is increased, okay, we can say the leakage will be reduced and it is like more energy efficient. And the other way, when the VTH is reduced, we can say it is more performance driven. So these two kind of operations are possible with the help of this FDSOI. So this is our next kind of technology which we have, which we started using it, but due to the like say due to the fabrication challenges, because we need to have this alpha thin buried oxide and the source and drain in between the channels will be very thin, should be very thin. So we have all these kind of complications, and we kind of, not all the foundries are using this kind of FDSOI technology. So it was first developed or first introduced by the ST Microelectronics, and even now they are using this FDSOI. But now other foundries are not using this FDSOI. So they are moved to kind of different new technology, so which is the FinFET. So field effect transistor. You can see on the screen one picture. One is the planar. On the left, you have the planar one. On the right, you're having the FinFET technology. So the transistor formed with the planar CMOS technology, and the other one with the FinFET technology. So here you can see that the channel is kind of is not now horizontal. Okay, you can see the gate is completely covering the source and drain. So these we call it as fins. So earlier it used to be like only the horizontal one. Now it's kind of like say we have some kind of edges, and it has grown. So it is no more it's no more horizontal one, and now we have the fins which will act as the source and drain. And in between that you cannot see that. So there is an empty space, and the channel will be formed in between that. So will be again the same. They will be applying the potential to the gate, and after the threshold voltage, the channel will be formed, and from source to drain, we'll be seeing the electrons flow. Okay. So now that means like from source to drain, we are having this kind of transfer. As the channel length is reducing, as I said, right? So as the channel length is reducing, we have less controllability. But now what happens? So when we use this kind of 3D architecture, we call it as the 3D architecture. So we have control over the channel from the three dimensions: the left, right, and the top. So earlier it used to be only from the top, the channel will be formed underneath that. Now it's from the left, right, and top, we have the kind of channel is formed in between that. So that means we have better controllability over the channel formation compared to the planar CMOS. So that's how FinFET have resolved the problems like related to the controllability and the formation of the channel. So as I said, you like the technology known shrinking, and we will have this controllability now. FinFET has come to the rescue, which will increase your controllability. So as I said, with 3D gate architecture of FinFET, we can increase the controllability. It has high drive currents. So by the way, it is having very high drive currents compared to my planar CMOS. So it has faster switching times. Obviously, like the channel length is reduced and we have better controllability. So we can say we have faster switching time. So coming to the next one, which is GAA, which I call it as gate all around. So gate all around Now here you can see the gate is kind of completely surrounded by the channel. So though in between we are having this nano wires. Okay, so nano wires is now my source and drain. So which is kind of having the channel. I mean, in between we'll be having the channel. From the source to drain, we'll be having the communication, and this gate is surrounded completely from all the four dimensions. That means a top, left, right, and bottom will be having the gate, and again we'll be supplying the potential to the gate, and the channel will be formed in between. So that means like we'll be having even more better controllability compared to my FinFET. But it has its own fabrication challenges, because in order to have this kind of fabrication, so it might be looking very easy. So when you see on this over here with your naked eyes, but when you're fabricating this, so it will be like very minute, right? So you cannot even see with your naked eye the transistor which is formed over there. So we'll have lots of challenges which we face. So over there. So as you can see over here, right? So this is kind of nano wire, which is what? It's 8 nanometer of diameter we have. So the 8 nanometer of diameter, you can assume like how small my channel will be, and how complex the fabrication steps will be. And we call it as yield over here. So we'll be assuming something, and we'll be starting fabricating. For example, say we wanted to fabricate some 100 processors. Okay, let's say. So once the fabrication is done, okay, so we might end up in like having 30 to 40 processors which are actually working. So you can see because so that's the kind of process which is involved in fabricating this. So during that process, if something goes wrong, or if it is not happening as expected, what happens? So you can say you need to just discard that particular processor over there, right there. So that means if the complexity of the process, if the complexity of the fabrication process keeps on increasing, so you will kind of have end up in, like say, having a lesser yield. So now with this kind of gate all around technology, you might have like say 15 to 20 processors out of 100 processors working. So that means like fabrication cost will increase, and everything will increase. But that means like what I'm trying to say over here is like we can come up with various kind of things. We might start thinking of various other ways to fabricate the transistor. But what is feasible and what is actually possible to fabricate will be different. So I mean, our fabrication foundries, we call it, like say for example TSMC, you might be aware of global foundries. So these are the ones which will be fabricating the processors. So when I say fabricating, that means manufacturing the processors in the layman's word. Okay, so these guys will be fabricating or manufacturing, but they should also have the kind of sophisticated technology with whatever maybe the design we keep in front of them. So that means that the designer and also the foundry guy, the fabrication guy, so should be in alignment with each other in such a way that what is feasible for them, what kind of design we can develop, so such that they can fabricate this. So this is what like about my evolution of transistors. So like I said, this is the last one. So gate all around. So fins are now nanowires, we can say, as I said to you, fins are now nanowires. So I think I kind of put everything in one picture. So starting from the planar CMOS, so you can see the three-dimensional one. I mean, sliced architecture over here. So this is the gate over here, which is formed. So source to drain will be having the communication, and now this is FDSOI double gate. We can also say, so from top and bottom we'll be having, and source to drain will be having the communication, and then the FinFET. So we kind of, you can see the fins over here, 1, 2, and 3. So instead of so these three fins are kind of embossed, and we'll be having the communication from the source to drain, and we'll be having the 3D gate over here. And the last one is the gate all around and well fed. So that means you can see the nano wires over here, which are round in structure, and it is like we're kind of controlling this on all the four sides, on all the four sides. So this is like everything in one picture, I can say. Whatever we have discussed so far, it's all in one picture over here. So some important fabrication steps. So I think I've been discussing with you related to the foundry and everything, right? So I would like to mean, I'm not going to discuss in detail all the process steps which are involved in the fabrication, but I would like to, keep in front of you some of the very important steps which are involved in the fabrication. So the first one is the crystal growth. Crystal growth, so it's like we call it a substrate, for example. So we'll be, the starting product over here is the silica sand. Okay, so we'll be taking the silica or sand, we'll be like say kind of melting that particular thing, and we'll be growing this crystal over here. So most of the crystals we have will be like the disc shape. So you might have seen the CD or VCD at your CD at your home, right? So it's like circular one. So it's similar to that. Okay, the crystal, the initial one will be similar to that. We'll be developing that kind of crystals. Okay, so and then when we start using that particular thing. Okay, so we will melt at very high temperatures. Will melt at very high temperatures, and will kind of remove all the impurities which are present in that before melting that, and will be forming this kind of crystal over here. So I can say one important point related to this crystal. So I can say the bigger the crystal, thicker it has to be. Okay, I mean, because for its mechanical stability, uh, the bigger the crystal, we need to have thicker width. So, okay, so because that again will be forming, or that again will be kind of substrate for you, or the starting step for you, the crystal growth. So if it is like smaller, you can compromise on the width of thickness of that. But if you want it to be bigger, your width is to be more. And the next one is the oxidation. Okay, so oxide layer basically will have good masking properties, dielectric properties, and also insulating properties. So oxide layer will be using, and oxidation. So kind of oxide layer. For example, you wanted to prepare one kind of particular shape over there. So for example, I'll be drawing you something over here. So let's say you wanted to fabricate this particular process, a particular shape. Okay, so you want to fabricate this particular shape. So all this is happening in, like say, this is very minute, and you cannot uh, make this by hand. Okay, so I think that part is very clear to you. So it's like all the kind of fabric, one of the fabrication step. So let's say we wanted to develop this kind of shape. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll be preparing one mask. First of all, we'll be preparing one kind of mask for this one. So how my mask will look like. So it's like complete big sheet, and wherever we want to prepare the shape, we'll kind of will not have anything over there. So that means, so this is the one where we want it. I mean, this is the one which we want to fabricate. So here, this space will be empty. Okay. So that means the light can pass through this particular thing. Okay. So what we will do is, so underneath this, you will be having the complete oxide layer. Okay, we'll be having, this is like complete my oxide layer. Okay, on top of this, we'll be having the mask. So as I said to you, oxide layer will have good masking properties. Okay, so what is going to happen is, from the top, we'll be passing the UV light. We'll be passing that UV light, and as we don't have this is open here. The mask here in the center is open. The light will pass through that, and it will fall on the oxidation layer, on the oxide layer, and it will soften. It means wherever it is exposed, the oxide layer is exposed, it will soften, and the other part will be hard. So this part and this part will be hard, and the big and the middle part will be soft. What we'll do? So once we'll pass that UV light through this mask, and we'll just now remove the mask, and then using some acids, okay, some base liquid. What we'll do is we'll just etch this out. So bam, you have the shape formed over here. So you can keep whatever may be the required element which we have to put in this particular shape which is formed. So that's how the oxide layer, I can say, which we have good masking properties. And also oxide layer has good insulating properties or dielectric properties. So we can kind of add one thick oxide layer in between any two layers so that it will be acting like a insulator. So there will be no communication from, there will be kind of no interaction between one layer to the layer underneath that, if at all we have oxide layer in between. So that means like oxidation is one of the important step. So that's why I wanted to bring or explain about this particular thing here. And the next one is the photolithography. I think I might have already covered this. So it's a process of like etching out the unwanted area. So we'll be passing out the light through the mask, and it's like UV light which we pass. So and the technologies, if the technology nowadays keep on shrinking, we'll be ending up using various frequencies of the UV lights. Okay, so the current, the current frequency, we can call it as extremely ultraviolet UV rays, which we are using now to fabricate this particular thing. Okay, the photolithography, coming to photolithography again. So we'll be having the mask over here. On the mask, we'll be passing that UV light. Wherever this UV light goes and enters or falls on that oxidation layer or any other masking layer, the particular area will be soft, will become soft, and we can etch that out, and we can put whatever is required in that particular open area. So this is how you can make use of this photolithography process. So these are, these three are the important steps which I wanted to bring up to you related to the fabrication process. Okay, ASIC flow, application specific integrated flow. So ASIC, okay, I wanted to say what is ASIC here, application specific integrated circuit. That means we kind of have something in mind. Let's say what, let's say for example, graphics processor. Okay, we wanted to have some kind of graphics. Okay, we will be having that particular thing in our mind, and we will develop all the requirements, all the related things. We'll jot it down, what are the things which we require, and start processing that. So that means this particular IC which we are going to develop is going to have one kind of functionality. So one specific functionality. So that's why we call it as application specific integrated circuit. So this ASIC, whatever may be the circuit which we have developed, what is the end product of this one, is going to do only one kind of functionality, so that which we had in mind or which we thought of designing. So that is the only thing which is going to work like after it is fabricated. So that's why we call it as application specific integrated circuit. So let's see what are the steps involved in this one. So starting with specifications. Specifications. So as I said to you, for example, say let's take the case of CPU. So what's the clock speed we wanted to have? How many? What is the RAM? What is the cache? And how many number of USB ports we need to have? And what is the? What is? Do we need to have access to CD player or anything? So what kind of video controller we are going to use? So how much graphics it can support? Everything we'll jot it down. So we'll kind of develop one kind of specification. So whatever I said is like basic specifications. It involves like way more than what I have specified actually. So so those basic specifications we will take into consideration, and then we start our flow. So specifications is the first one, and then coming to my architecture design. So RISC architecture and x86 architecture or ARM architecture and so on and so forth. So what kind of architecture we wanted to follow? So we'll kind of decide now. So that means like so we have the specifications and what kind of architecture we wanted to follow. So I'll kind of decide here. So we'll kind of design our architecture, so where everything goes. Okay, so we'll kind of design my architecture at this step, and then coming to my RTL design. So we have something in my mind. In order to achieve that, what we'll be designing my RTL, register transfer level language. So with the help of like Verilog or VHDL, so we'll be coding that. That means like we wanted to have this, we wanted to achieve this kind of specific functionality, and then we are going to use this RTL design. So that means that the RTL designer, the front end designer, is going to design this particular thing. So based upon the specifications and architecture design which he has in front of him, will be designing his RTL. Okay. So RTL is nothing but like say what we can say he'll be coding something in my log of HDL, and then coming to the verification part. So verification in the sense whatever the designer has coded, okay. So the verification engineer will see if it is say what we can say we have some input and RTL guy has coded that, and we need to now check, right, whatever he is coded is meeting the specifications or going to achieve the functionality which we wanted or not. So that's the purpose of the RTL verification guy.